welcome back. Today we're recapping The Water Magician, covering the key moments, major twists, and everything you need to know. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get started. The story opens over the vast Rondo forest, where an isolated house stands beyond any settled road. Inside, a young man has awakened in a world he does not recognize. No settlement is visible for miles. A memory soon explains everything. After dying in an accident on Earth, Rio meets a calm celestial administrator who offers him another life in the magical world called Phi. Death becomes the start of another life. Rio accepts reincarnation and asks for a quiet existence. Instead of a heroic blessing, he chooses water affinity, believing a practical element will help him survive without attracting attention. That modest choice will eventually prove misleading. He awakens in the dangerous Rondo forest, already wearing local clothes and carrying basic knowledge of the language. A protected house, supplies, and a temporary barrier are his only advantages. Only the cottage grounds remain protected. The cottage contains food for roughly 2 months, books, tools, and simple furniture. Since no rescue is coming, Rio understands that every skill he develops now may determine whether he lives. Time becomes his greatest enemy. His first experiments confirm that water magic responds to imagination rather than spoken formulas. By picturing pressure, temperature, and flow, Rio creates water with surprising precision. This lets knowledge from Earth replace the teacher he lacks. He quickly expands the idea, producing warm water for bathing and concentrated streams for cutting. The scientific concepts from his former life become a hidden advantage no local teacher could provide. Convenience gradually strengthens his defenses. Once the basic spells feel stable, Rio walks beyond the cottage and studies the surrounding forest. The silence is beautiful, but tracks and distant movement warn him that monsters share this territory. The warning is immediate. At night, he records every result, comparing failed spells with successful ones. This disciplined routine lets him improve faster while conserving the limited food stored inside the protected house. Careful notes prevent him repeating dangerous failures. Rio learns to freeze water into solid shapes and tests the strength of his ice. Spears, walls, and slick surfaces give him options for both defense and attack. The frozen shapes become tools, traps, and weapons. His control grows until he can summon water instantly without a chant or staff. What seems natural to Rio would already look extraordinary to trained magicians elsewhere in Phi. Chantless casting would shock ordinary academy graduates. The first real threat is a boar-like monster charging through the undergrowth. Rio holds his ground and forms sharp ice before the creature can reach him. Panic would waste the narrow opening before the charge lands. Several ice spikes pierce the monster and stop its rush. Although shaken by his first kill, Rio butchers the animal because wasting meat would shorten his chance of survival. Necessity quickly overcomes his hesitation about blood. Back at the cottage, he studies monster records and learns that this forest contains creatures far beyond his current strength. Dragons and demons are described as disasters rather than ordinary enemies. The warning changes his routine. Rio responds by training harder. He practices movement, sword handling, and rapid casting until he can attack while running instead of standing still, like an inexperienced mage. Physical practice keeps him useful when casting becomes impossible. A predatory hawk begins striking from above, retreating whenever Rio prepares a counterattack. Its speed exposes a weakness in his ice magic and forces him to develop a faster water jet. Speed matters more than power. Later, a headless armored swordsman appears beneath the moon. Rather than killing Rio, the mysterious Dullahan repeatedly challenges him, turning each midnight encounter into brutal combat training. Each duel punishes habits that no solitary practice revealed. Rio survives by combining sword work with flowing water defenses. The Dullahan presses him relentlessly, but its measured attacks suggest it is testing his growth instead of hunting him. That restraint keeps even the brutal lessons survivable. When the hawk returns, Rio finally tracks its movement and fires multiple ice spears into the sky. The evolved predator falls before it can escape the attack pattern. The victory ends a threat evolving around him. The victory proves his training works, yet the stronger monster also confirms that staying weak is not an option. Rio begins treating every quiet day as preparation for the next disaster. Complacency becomes worse than fear. After another duel, the Dullahan leaves behind a fine sword and a protective mantle. Rio accepts the gifts as silent acknowledgement that he has earned the strange warrior's respect. The equipment marks his first bond here. Equipped with real gear, Rio expands his patrols and faces the forest with greater confidence. He still wants peace, but his growing power makes him less dependent on the house barrier. Freedom comes with greater responsibility. His exploration finally draws the attention of a red dragon. Instead of attacking, the creature approaches calmly and reveals an intelligence far beyond the beasts Rio has fought. Neither side treats the encounter as a battle. The dragon introduces himself as Leviathan and recognizes something unusual in Rio. This peaceful meeting ends Rio's first year of isolation, while the hidden gift of eternal youth quietly reshapes his future. Peace already looks temporary. Sometime later, Rio discovers wreckage near the coast and searches the cliffs for survivors. Among the scattered remains, he finds one badly injured adventurer still clinging to life. No other survivor answers from the coast. Rio carries the stranger home and treats him with water magic. The wounded man wakes holding a pendant, confused that an unknown forest resident managed to save him. His healing prevents the stranger dying before sunrise. The survivor introduces himself as Abel, an adventurer whose ship carried dangerous smugglers. With the crew gone, he is the only person able to explain the outside world to Rio. Their meeting connects Rio with civilization. Abel is astonished by Rio's home, healing, and complete lack of money. Rio has survived for years without realizing how unusual his silent casting and remote lifestyle truly are. That ignorance seems stranger than Rio's power. Once his strength returns, Abel warns that remaining alone is becoming risky. He offers to guide Rio north toward Lune, where a guild card can provide identity and protection. The offer finally gives both men direction. Rio agrees, but leaving the cottage means abandoning the only secure place he knows. He prepares food, equipment, and monster materials while Abel explains what can be sold. Every packed item closes another chapter of isolation. Before departing, Rio meets the Dullahan one final time. The headless swordsman accepts their farewell without words, and Abel realizes his companion has formed alliances with terrifying beings. Abel now questions everything that Rio considers ordinary. The Dullahan confirms the sword and mantle belong to Rio, then disappears into the forest. Abel can only wonder what kind of training produced such an impossible friendship. That silence makes the farewell even more meaningful. At dawn, the two men leave the protected house behind. Rio looks back once, knowing that his quiet isolation has ended and that every settlement will bring unfamiliar rules. The road ahead replaces the barrier behind. Their route crosses dense territory filled with lizardmen. Abel charges with practiced sword techniques, while Rio controls the battlefield by freezing the ground and limiting every approach. Their very different strengths immediately create a balanced formation. When the lizardmen surround them, Rio launches several ice spears at once. Abel had assumed water mages were support fighters, so the attack completely changes his opinion. Abel realizes Rio has hidden an even greater power. Abel explains combat arts, magical stones, and the ranking system used by adventurers. In return, Rio admits that he can create water directly rather than drawing it from nearby sources. Each lesson makes their partnership efficient. That ability is considered impossible for an ordinary water mage, yet Rio treats it as basic survival magic. Abel wisely stops asking how many accepted rules his companion can break. Abel has no useful comparison left. Their next obstacle is a group of stone golems whose damaged bodies repair themselves. Normal cuts accomplish little, forcing the travelers to attack their balance and internal cores. Regeneration turns a simple fight into a puzzle. Rio spreads ice beneath the heavy constructs and knocks them down, while Abel targets exposed weak points. Together they destroy the cores before the stone bodies can reform. Their solution works because both attacks arrive together. The recovered magic stones prove valuable, and Abel teaches Rio how adventurers divide rewards. Their partnership becomes practical rather than accidental, with each covering the other's weaknesses. Shared rules prevent money from damaging their growing trust. Beyond the forest, they encounter a behemoth large enough to dwarf ordinary monsters. Rio and Abel avoid provoking it, understanding that curiosity is not worth dying for. Their restraint here proves more valuable than any victory. The behemoth demonstrates why direct magic is unreliable against it, dispersing nearby energy before battling a griffin. The mountains themselves serve as a barrier keeping such creatures from human lands. Observation remains their safest available lesson. Rio watches the battle and recognizes a level of power he still cannot challenge safely. Instead of feeling defeated, he studies every movement and stores the lesson for later. The gap gives him another long-term goal. As the route climbs, winter conditions replace the forest. Rio's water magic supplies drinking water and his eye control, while Abel's experience keeps them from choosing dangerous passes. Practical magic saves their limited strength for later combat. A flock of wyverns attacks before they can descend. Rio creates aerial ice spears, while Abel uses fire and sword techniques to keep the creatures from closing in. The attack tests every lesson learned so far. The pair fight back to back, adjusting to each other's timing without discussion. Abel draws the wyverns low, and Rio strikes the openings with precise volleys. Growing trust lets them divide the sky without wasting a single movement. After the last wyvern falls, they collect a rare green magic stone. Abel realizes the evidence alone will make the guild question how two travelers survived the mountains of death. The proof becomes impossible to dismiss. Rio is simply pleased that both of them survived. His relaxed reaction leaves Abel speechless, because their journey has crossed territory that destroys experienced parties. His calm response makes their impossible journey sound almost completely routine. With the mountains behind them, Abel points toward the nearest city and promises curry, proper clothes, and registration. Rio follows, unaware that his quiet arrival will immediately attract guild attention. Civilization promises comfort and unavoidable attention. The travelers finally reach Kailati after dark and rent a room near the gate. For Rio, even a modest roadside town feels overwhelming after years of total isolation. The first crowd already feels exhausting to him. Abel takes him to a tavern and introduces curry, instantly winning Rio's loyalty. The familiar flavor connects him to Earth and becomes his favorite discovery in the New World. That comfort makes the dangerous journey worthwhile. Over dinner, Abel explains that a guild card can serve as legal identification across the kingdom. Rio agrees to register, though he still hopes to avoid fame and difficult assignments. It replaces his missing identity papers. They continue toward Lune across open country. Rio's new mantle and sword make him look more like an adventurer, but his cheerful curiosity still reveals how little he knows. Each conversation reveals another rule he missed. At the city gate, guards recognize Abel and welcome him home. Rio quietly enters beside him, unaware that the wyvern stones in their packs will make anonymity impossible. The guards treat Abel like a returning celebrity. Lune immediately overwhelms Rio with crowded streets, shops, and unfamiliar customs. Abel guides him through the attention while promising that guild registration will solve his practical problems. He relies on Abel to interpret every overwhelming detail. The famous adventurer's return draws a loud reception from local colleagues. Their questions about the mountains of death force Abel to admit that Rio was essential to their survival. The admission immediately redirects attention toward Rio. Rio also notices elves and other races living openly in the city. The diverse crowd confirms that Phi is far larger and stranger than the forest books suggested. His old books never captured this everyday diversity. Inside the Adventurers Guild, Abel introduces his companions from Crimson Sword. Their relaxed welcome contrasts with the careful attention they give Rio's equipment and magical stones. The veterans sense that his quiet manner hides unusual strength. The guild quickly hears that the pair crossed the Forbidden Mountains together. Adventurers gather around Abel, while Rio realizes his first public appearance is already becoming a story. Attention is exactly what he hoped to avoid. Abel presents Rio to the guild staff and confirms the newcomer saved his life. That recommendation prevents officials from dismissing Rio as an untrained rural traveler. Abel's reputation shields Rio throughout the guild's formal interview process. Guildmaster Hugh studies the wyvern stones and recognizes their value immediately. He also understands that someone capable of obtaining them cannot honestly be treated as a complete beginner. The evidence leaves Hugh little room for doubt. The receptionist Nina records Rio's information, despite his unusual history and missing documents. Abel's testimony gives him a legal identity, a guild card, and access to work. Rio now officially exists within the kingdom's legal system. Hugh assigns Rio rank D instead of the lowest rank, citing the mountain crossing and Abel's report. The decision surprises everyone except Rio, who barely understands the system. The promotion also places stronger expectations on him. Crimson Sword privately discusses Rio's chantless magic and impossible control. They compare his destructive potential with the Empire's feared Inferno magician, though Rio himself wants no rivalry. Their concern foreshadows conflicts Rio does not yet understand. Because Rio owns almost nothing, Nina offers him a place in the guild dormitory. He also accepts an introductory dungeon course, so he can learn official adventuring procedures. The course tests more than raw magical power. Abel spends the day buying Rio proper clothes and basic city supplies. Rio is grateful, but every purchase reminds him how completely he depended on forest survival skills. City life demands completely different preparation from survival. The friends leave the guild and walk through Lune together. Abel points out important streets while Rio studies the buildings, markets, and routes he will need alone. Soon, Abel stops personally guiding Rio through every decision. At the dormitory, Rio is assigned to room 10 with 3 novice adventurers, Nils, Ito, and Amon. Their ordinary ambitions make him feel unexpectedly comfortable. Their humble status makes the simple welcome feel sincere to Rio. The roommates quickly notice that Rio lacks common knowledge but never mocks their lower experience. His calm manner turns an awkward introduction into the beginning of genuine friendship. Rio finally begins building a life among others. A silver-haired novice explains the dorm rules and the limited period residents may stay. Rio accepts the arrangement, finally gaining a place within human society. Even temporary housing feels like genuine belonging after his forest years. The guild later holds a welcome gathering where Rio meets more adventurers and staff. The noisy celebration is the opposite of his quiet forest dinners, yet he enjoys it. Crowded noise feels comforting rather than threatening. Crimson Sword raises a toast to Abel's return and Rio's arrival. Beneath the laughter, the veterans remain aware that the mysterious water mage could change Lune's balance of power. They know anonymity is difficult to preserve. By the end of the night, Rio has identification, work, friends, and a bed. His peaceful plan seems closer than ever, even as the guild begins watching him carefully. One day completely transforms his new life. Rio begins the guild's introductory course inside Lune's massive dungeon complex. The instructors focus on maps, formations, and retreat procedures rather than flashy combat. Proper discipline keeps beginners alive. The lesson corrects habits from years alone. A veteran guide explains that the dungeon changes danger by floor, and careless parties can block one another in narrow passages. Rio listens seriously despite his overwhelming magic. Even great power cannot replace a reliable route. He is paired with a silver-haired novice, whose experience is limited but whose judgment remains steady. Rio deliberately follows the course rules instead of solving every problem alone. That choice earns her confidence before danger appears. The class descends through stone corridors while the instructor marks safe routes and emergency exits. Rio studies the structure, realizing that dungeon survival depends on teamwork and information. Preparation becomes another important expression of strength itself. When a monster attacks, Rio freezes its movement without endangering the others. The precise spell gives his partner time to finish the encounter using the technique she practiced. The entire formation earns this hard victory together. Back above ground, the trainees compare their experiences over drinks. Rio learns that confidence matters less than understanding each member's range, stamina, and reaction under pressure. These rules matter once retreat becomes impossible during genuine danger. The silver-haired novice admits she expected Rio to dominate the exercise. Instead, his restraint allowed everyone to participate, strengthening the trust needed for future real missions. She now trusts him to protect rather than overshadow her. Abel and the senior adventurers check the class results, pleased that Rio followed procedure. They warn him that improvisation is valuable only when allies understand his intentions. Rio accepts that warning without protest, pride, or defensiveness. Other trainees celebrate completing the first stage, including a small, energetic mage who loudly recounts every monster. Their enthusiasm helps Rio feel like part of the guild. Their excitement makes the dangerous profession look almost ordinary. The group prepares for another descent with healing supplies, lamps, and backup weapons. Rio quietly memorizes each item, filling gaps left by his isolated upbringing. Every item may determine whether an injured adventurer returns home alive. A wolf-like dungeon beast attacks the formation during the next exercise. The novices hold position while Rio prevents the creature from breaking through their line. Their discipline keeps panic from breaking the entire formation during contact. His silver-haired partner keeps her composure and calls the correct response. Rio supports her with ice rather than stealing the victory, proving the lesson has become practical. Her command perfectly coordinates every member's response at once. After the fight, Rio scouts the corridor and confirms no second monster is approaching. The cautious check protects the exhausted trainees from a common beginner's mistake. That habit matters more than celebrating one isolated victory. Later, he visits Loon's archive to research dungeon history and regional magic. The enormous shelves offer knowledge he could never find in the cottage's limited books. Research offers answers that combat training cannot easily uncover alone. An unnatural eclipse suddenly covers the city, turning daylight into darkness. Citizens look upward in confusion as the disturbance spreads across Loon and magic becomes unstable. The disturbance transforms an ordinary afternoon into a city-wide emergency. Rio is attacked before he can reach the others. He raises a thick ice barrier, stopping the first strike while searching the shadowed street for its source. The attacker clearly selected the darkness as tactical cover. A purple-haired assailant emerges with a curved blade and powerful magic. The attacker moves too deliberately to be a random criminal, forcing Rio into serious combat. The timing directly connects the assault with the unnatural eclipse. The enemy closes distance and tests Rio's sword defense. Rio blocks, retreats, and uses water pressure to prevent the attacker from controlling the narrow street. A reckless counterattack could injure civilians hidden inside nearby buildings too. Repeated impacts carve through ice, but each barrier buys Rio time to analyze the opponent's rhythm. His defensive control frustrates an enemy expecting an easy assassination. Every failed strike reveals more about the assassin's trained technique. Rio answers with compressed water and floating spheres, launched from several angles. The unexpected pattern forces the assailant to abandon a direct charge and defend. For the first time, Rio forces his attacker backward under pressure. The eclipse begins to weaken as their exchange reaches its limit. Unable to finish Rio quickly, the purple-haired attacker withdraws before guild reinforcements arrive. Escape becomes more important than finishing a duel that has already failed. Rio remains alert, unsure who ordered the attack or why. The encounter proves that his growing reputation has already attracted enemies outside ordinary dungeon work. Raw power cannot explain why someone specifically marked Rio for death. The guild examines the scene and recovers a small pouch connected to the assailant. No immediate answer emerges, but the evidence confirms the attack was planned. Someone carefully prepared both the assassin's weapon and escape route. Once daylight returns, Rio reports everything without exaggeration. His friends are relieved, while senior adventurers begin investigating the eclipse and the organized threat behind it. The investigation now extends far beyond ordinary guild authority or procedure. The novices return to their dormitory shaken but unharmed. Their course is complete, yet Rio understands that Loon's dangers are not confined to the dungeon below. The course taught survival, not the politics surrounding hidden enemies. The eclipse incident leaves several adventurers injured, and the guild spends the following days treating wounds and comparing reports. Rio's account confirms that the attacker deliberately used the city's confusion. Someone planned to isolate him completely. Rio returns to the hill overlooking Loon and resumes controlled practice. The calm landscape helps him test defensive spells without alarming citizens or revealing every technique he possesses. The practice restores his confidence after the ambush. He also treats minor injuries caused by the previous battle, using water magic to reduce swelling and restore mobility. Even healing becomes another exercise in precise control. Small improvements may preserve his mobility during another attack. A visit near the city church introduces Ryo to institutions that preserve magical records outside the guild. He begins searching for explanations about eclipses, barriers, and old attacks. The search directs him toward older institutional records. In the archive, Ryo notices a young-looking elf named Sarah reading advanced texts. Her focused expression and knightly posture suggest she is far more capable than an ordinary scholar. Her disciplined presence immediately catches Ryo's attention. Meanwhile, the novice teams receive new assignments and review what happened during the emergency. The silver-haired trainee remains cautious, while the others try to restore their confidence. Neither understands how important this quiet meeting will become. Guildmaster Hugh gathers senior adventurers and city representatives for a formal review. They suspect the eclipse attack was connected to wider instability beneath Lune. She gives no explanation and quietly returns to studying the difficult records. Crimson Sword, the novice teams, and experienced fighters attend the briefing. Hugh orders everyone to watch the dungeon entrances and prepare for a sudden mass evacuation. The unanswered encounter remains in Ryo's thoughts long after leaving. The Guildmaster emphasizes that isolated victories mean nothing during a large outbreak. Defensive lines, healing stations, and ammunition must be ready before the first alarm. Hugh fears someone deliberately tested Lune's defenses during the eclipse attack. Room 10 listened beside Abel and the veterans, realizing they may soon fight outside a controlled course. Ryo offers support but is also assigned to research. Everyone suspects the previous assault merely prepared something much larger. Nils, Ito, and Amon inspect their gear and discuss positions. Their friendship keeps fear manageable, yet each understands the next battle could involve real casualties. The warning summons every available adventurer toward the dungeon within minutes. Ryo crosses the city toward the archive while patrols move toward the arena surrounding the dungeon gate. Lune appears peaceful, but preparations continue everywhere. Even injured veterans return to defensive positions before the gates fully open. Sarah helps Ryo locate older records describing abnormal monster movement. The documents suggest that pressure inside the dungeon can release an overwhelming wave onto the surface. The arena quickly becomes the guild's temporary final defensive line. Below the city, scouting parties enter the lower passages and find groups of monsters moving upward together. Their formation is too organized to be ordinary migration. Ryo joins the front lines instead of keeping everything hidden. A magical signal is sent through the passage, warning the arena defenders. The glow racing upward confirms that the predicted emergency has already begun. The creatures emerge faster than tired teams can recover between successive clashes. Ryo and Sarah continue comparing records as the alarm reaches the archive. They identify the event as the feared Great Tidal Wave and prepare to support evacuation. Room 10 carries supplies and messages through the chaos. Ryo follows Sarah through the enormous shelves toward a protected route. Their priority is keeping civilians away from the arena while trained parties hold the gate. Their support prevents several wounded fighters from being abandoned behind. From above, the archive's height reveals how quickly the city has mobilized. Ryo confirms the evacuation path remains clear before turning attention toward the fighting. Ryo's wide attacks protect nearby allies without trapping them between monsters. The dungeon gate bursts open and a mass of goblins floods into the arena. Archers and mages immediately fire from the walls to prevent the creatures reaching Lune. Abel notices how much his control has improved. Abel, Crimson Sword, and multiple guild parties form the central defense. They rotate exhausted fighters backward instead of letting the monster wave break their line. The defense gradually turns scattered adventurers into a coordinated fighting force. Room 10 carries ammunition and supports wounded defenders while Abel coordinates counterattacks. Their introductory training finally proves useful under genuine pressure. A heavily armored monster finally emerges, forcing every remaining veteran toward the same battlefield together. Earth mages raise barriers to divide the horde into smaller groups. The temporary walls stop the goblins from surrounding isolated adventurers. Its arrival threatens to shatter the exhausted line before reinforcements can recover enough strength again. An enormous armored monster emerges after the lesser creatures fall. Its strength shatters ordinary attacks and forces the strongest fighters to combine their skills. Ryo creates the opening Abel needs by freezing the creature's exposed joints. Abel and the frontline adventurers attack from several directions, exploiting openings created by magic. The boss finally collapses before it can reach the city gate. Their synchronized attack finally stops the horde from advancing any farther. With the Great Tidal Wave contained, survivors gather around the fallen creature and count their losses. Lune remains safe, but everyone knows the dungeon's behavior has changed. Victory leaves the monster wave's true source completely unresolved. After the monster wave, Ryo returns to the guild and checks on the younger adventurers. Their injuries are minor, and shared food turns the tense aftermath into relief. The meal also confirms that Lune survived intact. Room 10 proudly recounts how they carried supplies and protected wounded fighters. Ryo praises their discipline, reminding them that useful support can decide a battle. Their pride comes from responsibility, not simply defeating enemies themselves. The small mage from the training group thanks Rio for treating the novices seriously. His patience gave them confidence without hiding the danger they faced. That respect matters deeply to adventurers who are often publicly underestimated. As the guild settles, reports arrive about an armed group moving through Lune. The men wear heavy armor but avoid official roads and checkpoints. Their careful movements suggest training, money, and protection from a powerful sponsor. Rio initially expects another ordinary assignment. His expression changes when Hugh explains that the strangers may be connected to the earlier eclipse attack. The unresolved ambush now appears connected to a broader conspiracy inside Lune itself. From an upper window, Rio witnesses armored men cornering a dark-haired woman in a narrow street. Their leader acts with authority but shows no city insignia. The woman's helpless position makes the scene impossible to ignore. A long-haired blonde knight commands the group while local thugs block the exits. The confrontation looks less like an arrest than an organized abduction. Everything about the operation suggests planning beyond ordinary criminal violence in Lune. Rio observes long enough to identify their route instead of attacking immediately. The decision gives the guild a chance to find the group's hidden base. Restraint preserves evidence that an immediate attack could destroy before examination. He reports the incident to Abel, who recognizes signs of a political operation. They agree that exposing the organizers matters more than defeating street-level soldiers. They need names, orders, and proof before making any public accusations. Abel meets Rio privately and explains the risks of acting without proof. Foreign agents, nobles, and mercenaries could all exploit a public mistake. A reckless rescue could give the real conspirators time to escape completely unnoticed. The two track the suspects through taverns and service passages. Abel handles witnesses while Rio uses water sensing to check doors in underground spaces. Their combined skills let them investigate quietly without alerting the entire district. Their search leads beneath Lune, where the armored group has gathered around captives and supplies. Rio prepares ice barriers before entering the chamber. The hidden location confirms the operation extends beyond one street incident in Lune. They find evidence linking the men to a planned disturbance, including marked containers and written orders. Abel secures the documents while Rio guards the exits. The captured papers may reveal who financed and authorized everything here. More soldiers rush in, forcing the pair to fight through the corridor. Rio controls movement with ice while Abel disables anyone who reaches close range. Their coordination prevents the narrow corridor from becoming a deadly trap. A red-haired mage attempts to destroy the evidence with a large fire spell. Rio contains the blast long enough for Abel to pull the captives clear. Saving people remains more important than preserving every captured document. The surviving conspirators retreat, leaving the blonde knight and several mercenaries exposed. City forces arrive before they can reorganize. The failed escape gives investigators prisoners, witnesses, and enough evidence for a formally authorized inquiry inside Lune. Hugh reports the captured documents to religious and civic authorities. The officials debate jurisdiction, but the evidence prevents them from ignoring the threat. The conspiracy now involves both dungeon security and possible foreign interference inside Lune. An elderly investigator identifies symbols associated with old dungeon rituals. The connection suggests the city attack, and the monster wave may share a hidden source. What looks separate may actually be one coordinated operation below Lune. Rio returns outside with the small guild messenger who helped carry reports. Her relief shows how widely the crisis affected even non-combatants. The frightened messenger reminds Rio that investigations also protect ordinary lives across the city. At the guild, Abel briefs the teams and orders them to avoid spreading rumors. A false accusation could create panic before the investigation is complete. Secrecy becomes necessary until authorities can identify every involved faction clearly. The young messenger provides a key location near the dungeon, linking the seized orders to a sealed lower chamber. Hugh authorizes a controlled expedition. The new location finally gives the expedition one concrete objective underground. Abel and Crimson Sword prepare to accompany scholars into the depths. Rio is kept near the city temporarily because his earlier disobedience still concerns Hugh. Hugh trusts Rio's power but not his willingness to obey orders. The investigators establish a guarded camp beside an ancient dungeon entrance. Strange stonework and a damaged device confirm that someone has been operating there. The damaged equipment suggests someone abandoned the site very recently. Before the descent, the team share a final meal and review signals. Rio studies the recovered mechanism, sensing that its mana pattern is deliberately artificial. The pattern resembles no natural dungeon phenomenon Rio has studied before. The expedition enters the cavern while officials monitor a measuring device above. The first readings are quiet, but the sealed darkness hints that the real danger remains below. Every quiet reading now feels dangerously temporary. Deep below Lune, the ancient device begins reacting to mana and bathing the chamber in green light. Investigators realize someone has used the dungeon for a summoning experiment. The ritual was never an accidental discovery underground. Senior officials compare the readings with forbidden religious records. The symbols point toward devils, Enemies thought absent from the central lands for centuries. Their return would overturn everything the guild understands about regional security and history. A ring of stones around a central box reveals the ritual's structure. The mechanism has been feeding energy deeper underground, rather than simply opening a normal dungeon route. Something below is still receiving that stolen power. A young guild messenger carries the warning back to Loon. Hugh orders several veteran parties to search lower floors while scholars continue examining the device. The warning immediately turns the investigation into an urgent rescue operation. The message reaches Abel and Crimson Sword first. They volunteer for the descent, knowing ordinary adventurers could be overwhelmed before understanding what they face. Abel refuses to leave less experienced parties facing unknown enemies alone. Hugh coordinates teams, supplies, and rescue routes from the guild. His greatest concern is not one monster, but several groups being trapped without enough mana. One failed route could turn the entire expedition into casualties underground. Ryo remains in the archive with Sarah, following Hugh's order to stay out of the expedition. He searches old texts for weaknesses that might help the teams. Obedience keeps him away from people he fears losing. The library's records describe devils as enemies of gods and angels, stronger than humans and resistant to magic. The information is incomplete and centuries out of date. Old terminology may hide crucial differences between enemy ranks. Sarah helps compare temple accounts with dungeon maps. Their research suggests concentrated attacks from several mages may break resistance that a single spell cannot overcome. The method offers hope, but only while several casters remain conscious. Ryo dislikes waiting while Abel is below, but he respects the rescue plan until new evidence appears. His patience depends entirely on receiving regular reports. Silence from below soon feels more alarming than any bad report. In the lower dungeon, multiple parties encounter humanoid creatures surrounded by green light. The veterans recognize them as devils only after ordinary attacks fail. The ancient threat is no longer theory preserved in forgotten books. The teams combine spells from 3 directions and discover the creatures can be killed. Every victory consumes far more mana than expected, making continued descent dangerous. Each success reduces their ability to survive the next room. Room by room, the adventurers advance while protecting exhausted casters. The younger mage stays behind the shield line and fires only when the veterans create an opening. Protecting depleted mages becomes as important as killing enemies. Hugh receives fragmented reports and realizes the expedition has entered a trap. With communications failing, he sends Natalie to find the one person Abel trusted for emergencies. Only Ryo may reach them before the formation collapses. The 4th chamber erupts with purple magic as more devils attack at once. Combined barriers hold briefly, but the defenders' remaining mana is nearly gone. The defenders cannot sustain another coordinated assault of this scale. A larger devil appears with mismatched eyes, identifying it as a demon prince. Temple records describe such beings as incomplete candidates for Demon Lord. Its presence confirms the ritual already exceeded every initial expectation. Abel orders the others to eliminate the lesser devils, while he engages the prince alone. The creature accepts, clearing space so no one interferes with their duel. Abel buys time for exhausted allies to escape safely. Crimson Sword defeats the remaining enemies, but the effort drains the party completely. They can only watch as Abel's speed begins falling against the stronger opponent. Their victory leaves no strength available to support him now. The Demon Prince overwhelms Abel with superior strength and regeneration. A heavy strike sends him crashing down, and his companions cannot reach him through the magical pressure. Regeneration erases every wound Abel manages to inflict alone. The wounded party tries to regroup around Abel, yet another burst forces them back. Their rescue route is closing while the prince remains almost unharmed. Without outside help, the entire trapped party will die here underground. The demon's different colored eyes confirm its rank, and despair spreads through the chamber. No one present believes a normal adventurer can defeat it alone. Knowledge of the enemy only makes their helplessness more certain now. Abel attempts one final counterattack but collapses from his injuries. The prince raises its weapon, ready to finish the duel before anyone can intervene. The duel is seconds from ending with Abel's death in plain view. At that moment, Ryo arrives after forcing his way through the dungeon's closed routes. He steps between Abel and the prince without showing fear. His arrival immediately changes fear into a narrow chance for survival. Ryo checks Abel's condition and scolds him for nearly dying to such a weak opponent. The joke irritates Abel, but it proves his friend has come in time. Relief reaches the chamber through their familiar argument. After ordering everyone else towards safety, Ryo turns to the Demon Prince. He forms ice spears and compressed water, promising to end the battle himself. This time, Ryo faces an enemy unlike any forest monster. News of the trapped expedition reaches Loon, and the dungeon entrance is sealed to ordinary traffic. Natalie finds Ryo because Abel specifically named him as emergency help. Natalie personally delivers the warning Hugh feared sending. Ryo refuses to wait for an official rescue team. He breaks through the restricted route and uses a powerful water jet to descend toward the 40th floor. Speed matters more than procedure while Abel is bleeding. While he races downward, Sarah remains in the archive with the records they uncovered. She understands that Rio has ignored orders because Abel's life is in danger. She can only trust his judgment from afar. Rio confronts the demon prince and immediately notices its regeneration. He dodges the first attacks, then cuts away limbs to measure how quickly they return. He tests the enemy carefully before committing to one decisive attack. Abel and the survivors retreat to a safe distance while Rio takes control of the chamber. His calm movements make the supposedly legendary enemy appear slow. The survivors finally gain room to protect their wounded companions. The prince tries to intimidate him with speed and magical pressure. Rio answers that Leviathan was faster, treating the duel as another demanding training exercise. Training against impossible opponents prepared him for this pressure long ago. When the demon charges again, Rio pins it with layered ice and water attacks. The restraints break, but each escape reveals another weakness in its defense. Every failed restraint supplies information for the finishing move later. Rio ends the experiment by launching 256 water jets at once. The overlapping strikes overwhelm regeneration and destroy the demon prince completely. Sheer precision succeeds where ordinary power and repeated strikes completely failed. Arthur, an investigator from the Royal Magic Bureau, thanks Rio for saving the expedition. The survivors begin collecting magic stones for families of those who died. Respect for the dead replaces celebration inside the devastated chamber. The group senses an unnatural magical field near the lower staircase. When the prince dies, the field stops, proving the monster was connected to a hidden device. The connection confirms deliberate control rather than coincidence underground. Rio uses a probing spell and discovers a concealed chamber beside the normal route. Inside, the investigators find an altar and equipment designed to emit mana. The discovery immediately transforms a rescue into a larger investigation. A recovered memory reveals an earlier summoning involving a hero named Roman and a purple-haired woman called Leonora. Roman mistakes her for the demon lord. The vision directly connects present danger with an older summoning disaster. Leonora calmly explains that she is an Akuma and far stronger than the summoned hero. She also mentions a human whose power exceeds even Roman's expectations. Her casual confidence makes Roman's supposed heroism look dangerously naive. Back in the present, Rio compares devils, Akuma, and the strange ritual. The distinctions remain unclear, but the new threat obviously reaches beyond ordinary monsters. Rio now knows the enemy hierarchy is far deeper than expected. The guild hides Rio's role in the victory to protect him from nobles and foreign states. Publicly, the expedition survives through combined effort rather than one water mage. The lie protects Rio while preserving political stability. Abel accepts the cover story, though he privately promises Rio a week of dinners. Their argument restores some normality after the deadly expedition. Food becomes Abel's safest way to repay a debt beyond calculation. Hugh warns everyone that devils have not appeared in the Central Lands for centuries. He orders continued research and tighter control over dungeon access. The guild can no longer treat ancient warnings as distant history. The survivors leave the investigation to Arthur's team and return to Lune. Their reunion at the guild honors the dead without turning Rio into a public hero. Private gratitude replaces the public praise Rio deliberately avoids. Later, Rio visits his favorite curry restaurant and properly meets Sarah. She already knows his reputation but speaks to him as another magic researcher. Their shared curiosity matters more than rank during the first conversation. Their conversation becomes easy once Curry appears. Rio learns that Sarah serves as sword instructor for the Margrave's Knights and is much older than she looks. The revelation makes her youthful appearance especially surprising to Rio. Outside, Sarah challenges Rio to a friendly spar so she can judge his sword work. Rio accepts, curious about the wind magic surrounding her movements. The friendly challenge lets both test the other's unusual fighting style safely. Sarah uses a wind mantle to accelerate and redirect her strikes. Rio blocks with the protective mantle received from the Dullahan and answers with controlled swordplay. Their protective enchantments turn speed into a careful technical contest. Their duel intensifies across the training arena, yet neither aims to injure the other. Sarah realizes Rio's mantle carries the favor of the King of Fairies. Mutual respect grows while neither fighter reveals every hidden technique. Sarah explains that elves are close to fairies and can sense such protection. Rio is surprised while she becomes more curious about his impossible history. The revelation directly connects Rio's forest years to ancient fairy authority. Hugh finally punishes Rio for disobeying the dungeon lockdown by assigning him an escort mission. Rio accepts the change of pace and leaves Lune with a guarded carriage. The assignment also gives Room 10 practical experience. After the escort assignment, Rio returns to the guild dormitory and learns Room 10's residency period is almost over. The friends must soon choose where to live. The approaching separation gives the ordinary problem unexpected weight. Hugh reviews Rio's mission report and confirms the punishment is complete. Before releasing him, the guildmaster warns that rural requests can hide unfamiliar local customs. The warning proves useful as soon as Nils presents his request. Nils brings exactly such a request. Goblins and skeletons are threatening his home village, while previous adventurers failed to earn the residents' trust. Personal history makes this mission more complicated than a standard extermination contract. The roommates discuss the deadline in their shared room. Nils, Ito, and Amon plan to rent together, while Ryo has not decided what kind of home he wants. Their shared future suddenly requires practical decisions too. Ryo agrees to join Nils's village mission, turning it into Room 10's first serious trip together. Their familiarity makes coordination easier than assembling strangers. This time, the novices will carry responsibility beside their powerful friend. The village welcomes Nils warmly and treats his companions as guests. An elder explains that the eastern forest is sacred and protected by an ancient guardian beast. Respecting those boundaries becomes essential to earning local cooperation. Nils remembers the same forest from childhood, including warnings never to damage the Earth Mother's shrine. Those customs explain why earlier adventurers caused conflict. Knowledge of tradition becomes as important as skill with weapons or magic. A scar on Nils's face reminds everyone that the region has always been dangerous. He insists on protecting the village without disrespecting its traditions. This mission is personal, not simply another guild assignment for him. His family provides food and information about recent tracks. The goblins move in organized groups, while skeletons appear closer to the forbidden shrine. The pattern suggests both threats may be connected to the same disturbance. Room 10 eats with the villagers and divides responsibilities. Nils leads through local terrain, Ito handles support, Eamon watches the rear, and Ryo controls the battlefield. The plan gives every novice a clear role during contact. At dawn, the group enters the foothills and follows damaged vegetation toward the goblin territory. No one crosses sacred markers without Nils's permission. Careful movement protects the village's trust before any monster is encountered. A goblin patrol attacks from the trees, but the formation holds. Ryo freezes escape routes while the others defeat the creatures at close range. Their first real formation works exactly as planned under sudden pressure. One survivor flees toward a cave, revealing the nest. Ryo raises a large ice barrier to separate the goblins and prevent a coordinated rush. Controlling movement lets his friends prove their own growing strength in combat. Nils worries Ryo may destroy the forest, but the water mage shapes every spell around the trees. The careful control earns his friends complete trust. Power becomes useful because Ryo understands what must survive around him. Inside the cave, the goblin general is stronger and better armed than the others. Room 10 attacks together instead of letting Ryo finish it immediately. The fight tests whether everyone can win without depending on Ryo. The group kills the general and returns with proof. The Eldress then explains the village once worshipped the Earth Mother through non-verbal healing magic. The victory also opens a deeper mystery beneath the village traditions themselves. She guides them toward the sacred forest, where the skeleton sightings began. The villagers believe the missing shrine treasure may have disturbed the guardian. Solving the second threat requires permission, rather than brute force from outsiders. Near the shrine, the party finds traces of corrupted mana rather than ordinary necromancy. The energy points toward a source hidden below the altar. This corruption resembles deliberate magical contamination, not a wandering spirit. A huge white wolf appears and identifies itself as the village guardian. It recognizes the fairy protection around Ryo and chooses conversation over combat. The meeting turns a feared confrontation into a surprising local alliance instead. The guardian explains that Ryo's presence may extend its fading life. In exchange, it allows the party to investigate the shrine without violating the forest's protection. The bargain gives both sides reason to cooperate without conflict. Skeletons led by an armored Archon attack the approach. Ryo creates exceptionally slippery ice, letting Nils and Eamon shatter enemies that cannot maintain balance. Their teamwork converts unstable terrain into a weapon against stronger enemies. The Archon resists ordinary blows, so Ryo forms heavy ice hammers above it. Repeated impacts crush the armor and expose the corruption feeding the creature. Breaking the armor finally exposes the force controlling it from below. Behind the shrine, they discover a cave channeling stolen power into monster nests. The missing treasure has become a focus for the spreading energy. The discovery explains both the skeletons and the organized goblin attacks. Ryo seals the source with layered ice and water barriers, stopping the flow without destroying the shrine. The Guardian confirms the forest is stabilizing. Precision preserves the sacred site while ending the contamination beneath it safely. Room 10 returns home as recognized adventurers rather than trainees. Their success leads directly to a new escort job tied to a major festival and imperial visitors. Their next mission arrives before this victory settles fully. Room 10 accepts its first escort mission as a full adventuring team. The assignment is simple on paper: protect a merchant convoy traveling to Utunash for its famous festival. The job marks their independence from supervision. The convoy reaches the town after dark, and the adventurers inspect the lodging before merchants unload. Crowded streets make theft and surveillance more likely. Security matters even before anyone knows the convoy carries valuable goods. By morning, Uitunash is transformed into a market of food stalls, decorations, and visiting performers. The team receives 10 free days once escort duties end. For once, their schedule includes leisure instead of immediate danger. Elsewhere, Imperial officers arrive under heavy security. Their presence confirms the festival is also a diplomatic event, not merely a celebration. Politics quietly raises the stakes of every ordinary encounter around the visiting adventurers that week. The visitors include Princess Fiona, commander of an imperial magical unit, and her brother Conrad. A quiet military escort watches every route around them. Their status makes every public appearance a possible security problem for guards. Lieutenant Oscar Ruska accompanies the princess. Known as the Inferno Magician, he carries the same terrifying reputation Crimson Sword once used to measure Rio. Rio has heard the name long before seeing the man in person. Room 10 explores the festival after checking the merchant's cargo. The crowd gives Rio another lesson in ordinary life beyond monsters and dungeon emergencies. The peaceful outing feels unusually welcome after their recent village battles together. Nils, Ito, and Eamon guide Rio between stalls, making sure he tries local specialties instead of studying every building like a scout. Their guidance prevents him from treating a festival like another tactical survey of danger. Rio stays close to the silver-haired member of their group as the streets grow denser. Their formation remains relaxed but ready to protect one another. Even relaxation cannot erase habits built during dangerous missions. The water mage becomes enthusiastic about unfamiliar food, especially anything resembling curry. His simple excitement briefly makes the others forget his overwhelming strength. Food remains Rio's simplest connection to unfamiliar places and people. Across town, Oscar observes the festivities with professional distance. His white hair and formal uniform make him easy to recognize despite the peaceful setting. His calm watchfulness separates him from everyone enjoying the celebration around him. Conrad speaks with Oscar about the kingdom's representatives, including acting guildmaster Abel. Conrad suspects Abel resembles someone important but keeps the thought private. The resemblance raises questions about Abel's past without producing any answer for Conrad. Two red-haired officials discuss security and the coming garden reception. Their careful expressions reveal tension beneath the public celebration. Their private concern suggests the reception faces a threat still hidden from the public. Princess Fiona receives a formal briefing while seated inside the residence. She insists on attending public events rather than hiding behind Imperial guards. Fiona treats visibility as part of her duty to Imperial citizens during celebrations. Room 10 joins the crowds for contests and street games. Rio avoids using magic, letting his friends compete honestly and enjoy the festival. Playing fairly lets Rio participate without turning every contest meaningless for his friends. The group samples more dishes and compares prices from different regions. Their free time strengthens the bond formed during dangerous missions. Normal memories become valuable, precisely because danger has dominated their recent lives for many weeks. A food stall becomes an unexpected competition as everyone chooses too much. Rio's appetite surprises the merchants and amuses his exhausted companions. The harmless excess shows how comfortable the entire group has become together. Rio notices Sarah among the visitors and briefly loses his composure. Her presence reminds him that their friendship is becoming important outside training. Rio's reaction reveals feelings about Sarah he has not examined directly. During the archery events, the team watches skilled participants from across the kingdom. Ito becomes interested in equipment that can compensate for limited physical strength. The weapon could give Ito reliable range without advanced magic training. Conrad appears publicly, giving the crowd a chance to see the Imperial delegation. His calm behavior contrasts with the guards scanning every nearby face. Diplomacy depends on appearing calm while expecting an attack. The festival's boat race becomes Room 10's biggest challenge. Teams must coordinate speed and balance without magic, making cooperation more valuable than individual power. The contest quietly tests every skill their missions have developed under pressure. Nils and Eamon row while the others keep rhythm and direction. Their chaotic start improves until they cross the course as a functioning team. The improvement reflects trust learned through repeated danger and shared mistakes. Ito later buys a repeating crossbow that will support Nils and Eamon in future battles. The purchase shows how seriously the novices are planning ahead. The purchase turns festival amusement into practical preparation for future missions. While the celebration continues, conspirators prepare to collapse the reception's magical barrier. They intend to strike after key guild leaders leave their posts. Their timing will leave the most important guests exposed inside the garden alone. Years earlier, a red-haired child works beside a village forge and discovers he can control heat with unusual precision. The adults call the gift a blessing from the fire god. The talent defines his earliest memories. In the present, Rio and Sarah briefly discuss the Imperial delegation's security. Neither knows that Oscar's past is tied to the violence now approaching Utunash. The connection will become clear only after the attack begins. As a boy, Oscar learns metalwork from a patient blacksmith who treats him like family. His magic keeps the forge stable and makes even difficult work possible. Work teaches him patience before formal combat training begins. The blacksmith's household gives Oscar a peaceful childhood despite his unusual hair and power. He begins believing strength should protect the people who shelter him. Protection becomes the purpose he gives his growing power from childhood. That peace ends when armed bandits approach the settlement at night. The family hides Oscar, ordering him to remain silent while the adults confront the intruders. His guardians immediately choose his survival over their own safety. A bandit breaks through the defenses and chases anyone attempting to escape. Oscar hears fighting outside but is too young to help the people who raised him. Fear traps him more completely than any locked door. The attackers capture the blacksmith's family and demand valuables. Resistance only provokes more violence, leaving Oscar trapped behind the workshop wall. The child can hear everything while remaining powerless to change the outcome outside the wall. One raider searches the house while the others set fires. Oscar controls his breathing and waits, understanding that discovery would mean immediate death. His first act of discipline is simply refusing to make any sound. When silence finally comes, Oscar finds his family murdered. The sight destroys the simple belief that talent alone is enough to keep loved ones safe. This trauma becomes the foundation of his relentless training for years. The surviving blacksmith gives Oscar a light sword and urges him to live. That final gift becomes the weapon he carries through every later battle. The blade carries both love and an impossible responsibility for Oscar. Oscar wanders through the ruins with shock replacing grief. His red hair, once celebrated, now feels like power that arrived too late. That night, guilt turns his gift into a reminder of irreversible failure. He survives the wilderness and the wolves drawn by blood, refusing to release the sword. An older guardian eventually finds the exhausted child. Survival begins before he has any reason to believe life can improve again. Adopted and educated, Oscar dedicates himself to magic and swordsmanship. He chooses discipline over revenge, determined never to become helpless again. Every lesson afterward is shaped by the promise never to arrive too late again. A powerful fire instructor recognizes Oscar's potential and pushes him beyond ordinary military training. The boy eventually earns the title Inferno Magician. His title eventually makes him the Empire's most recognizable battlefield mage of his generation. Back at the festival, the garden reception begins beneath a chandelier and a protective barrier. Nobles gather while hidden attackers prepare to cut its mana supply. The celebration hides a carefully prepared killing ground beneath it. A guard notices irregular movement near the residence, but conspirators are already inside. Oscar receives an incomplete warning and starts moving toward Fiona. That delay gives the attackers precious time to reach their targets first. Fiona and Conrad remain at the reception as officials argue over security. The barrier artifact suddenly stops channeling mana, leaving the garden exposed. The failure confirms the conspiracy already penetrated the Imperial security network from within. Fiona raises a green defensive field around nearby guests. The spell saves civilians from the first strike, but begins draining her rapidly. Protecting strangers becomes more important to Fiona than preserving her strength for escape later. Assassins attack from multiple directions using earth and fire magic. Conrad draws his weapon while Fiona continues shielding people, instead of retreating. The siblings hold their position, because retreat would expose unarmed guests behind them. The reception collapses into panic as guards fight among overturned tables. Fiona launches red emergency spheres into the sky, signaling Oscar and the guild. The signal becomes their only chance of receiving outside help in time. Several defenders fall before reinforcements arrive. The assassins target Fiona specifically, confirming that the attack is political rather than random terrorism. The enemy's objective becomes undeniable once they ignore easier targets and press forward toward Fiona. Smoke covers the residence and cuts units off from one another. Oscar races through the city, following the fire and Fiona's signal. Every blocked street costs Oscar precious time while the residence burns ahead without him. Flames spread across the compound while Conrad keeps the remaining attackers away from his sister. Fiona's mana finally reaches its limit. Conrad cannot protect both Fiona and every civilian still trapped in the compound by himself. From above, the scale of the assault becomes clear, with separate battles across the district. Room 10 abandons the festival and moves toward the falling signal. The novices arrive before trained reinforcements can reach Fiona. The young adventurers intercept assassins near the outer path and catch an unconscious Fiona before she hits the ground. They form an ice defense and carry her away. Their rescue creates the misunderstanding that follows immediately. He catches Room 10 outside the city and demands the princess immediately. The exhausted novices protect Fiona, interpreting his aggressive approach as another enemy attack. Protecting Fiona now matters more than explaining themselves to the stranger. Rio steps between Oscar and his friends, refusing to surrender an unconscious woman to someone launching threats. Neither mage knows the other's real purpose. Rio recognizes Oscar's power but not his identity or loyalty to Fiona. Oscar attacks with the flames that earned him the title Inferno Magician. Rio forms layered ice walls, turning the open ground into a frozen battlefield. The misunderstanding immediately becomes a battle between legendary mages at night. Fire and water collide repeatedly, filling the night with steam and shattered ice. Oscar is stunned that an unknown adventurer can neutralize his strongest spells. Neither element gains a decisive advantage over the other for long. Rio counters with precise jets and freezes the ground beneath Oscar. The Imperial Lieutenant keeps fighting because he believes Fiona's life depends on reaching her. His desperation makes retreat or negotiation feel impossible. Abel arrives with Conrad's message and identifies both sides. He confirms Fiona is safer with room 10 and orders Oscar to stop the misunderstanding. One accurate explanation finally stops their elemental exchange completely. Rio remains furious because Oscar injured his friends. The confrontation now risks becoming an international incident between Knightley and the Empire. Stopping the duel is no longer enough to satisfy Rio's anger over his wounded friends. Abel offers to accept Rio's retaliatory strike without dodging, taking responsibility for preventing war. His willingness to die finally makes Rio lower his sword. Abel places friendship, responsibility, and peace above his own survival without hesitation. Fiona is returned safely, and Oscar apologizes for attacking the people who rescued her. Conrad accepts responsibility for the failed communication and security collapse. The apology cannot undo the battle, but it prevents another one. The festival ends under heavy investigation, but neither state chooses war. Fiona rewards Room 10 for protecting her, while Rio deliberately remains outside the ceremony. Their restraint keeps the political crisis from becoming an immediate war. Before the groups separate, Abel reminds everyone that restraint prevented a second disaster. Rio and Oscar acknowledge each other's strength without pretending the battle is forgotten. Respect survives even though trust will require more time. Room 10 returns to Loon with higher standing and enough money to plan life after the dormitory. Their teamwork has carried them far beyond novice status. Success finally gives them control over their immediate futures. The journey home ends peacefully, allowing Rio to think about ordinary problems again. For once, no monster, devil, or political assassin follows them. Peace feels unfamiliar enough to become its own kind of relief for Rio. Sarah welcomes Rio back and admits she noticed his absence. Her concern makes him realize their relationship has grown beyond research and occasional sparring. The reunion quietly confirms that both valued the separation more than expected. She arranges access to a restricted archive containing records unavailable to normal adventurers. Rio accepts, eager to understand devils, Akuma, and ancient summoning magic. Knowledge may prepare him for threats the guild still barely understands. Inside, they use a copy spell to transfer entire documents without damaging the originals. The efficient method lets Rio preserve information for later study. The spell turns restricted research into information they can study safely later. Their conversation reveals Sarah is nearly 200 years old. When Rio calls her young and beautiful, the composed sword instructor becomes visibly flustered. Her reaction reveals a vulnerability completely absent during their sword duel. Rio and Sarah agree to speak casually and consider each other friends. The simple decision gives both of them a connection outside official duties. That ordinary promise carries more weight than either says aloud at first. With the dorm deadline approaching, Rio searches Loon for a house large enough for magic practice and future alchemy. Ordinary city rooms offer too little space. Finding privacy becomes his next peaceful adventure outside the guild. An estate agent finally presents a farmhouse outside the walls with a large yard. The price is 50 million florins, yet Rio can afford it. Years of saved monster stones make the enormous purchase possible. Rio buys the property immediately, stunning the agent and securing a new peaceful home. His quiet life still feels distant, but he finally has somewhere to build it. It quietly fulfills his oldest reincarnation wish.